Veracruz was a village nestled among mountains, isolated from the world, and trapped in time. The fog never completely dissipated. There was a pact of silence among the residents, and a single warning to outsiders: never climb up to the old chapel. Helena, a determined historian, arrived in the village in search of colonial records. But what she found was distrust, downcast eyes, and doors closing as she passed. Something was being hidden, something ancient, dark, and still alive. Curious about the absence of documents regarding the convent that once existed there, Helena dug deep into the archives of the small town hall. What she found was a torn letter, dated 1897, with only one legible sentence: "She will return through the voice of those who dare to remember." While investigating the ruins of the chapel on the hill, Helena noticed symbols carved into the stones, inscriptions in Latin, and burned marks on the ground. A cold wind suddenly blew, bringing an almost human whisper: "Do you hear me?" At the inn, an elderly woman left an old book at the door of Helena's room. No author name, no cover. Inside, accounts of nuns and macabre penances, of voices emerging from the dark, of prayers that ended in screams and blood. The most recurring name in the book was Mother Isidora. According to the accounts, she led rituals to calm forces from below. After a grave mistake, the earth trembled and the chapel collapsed with all the sisters inside. No bodies were found. The next morning, Helena heard singing coming from the hill, even with the village immersed in sleep. The notes were high and long, almost laments. When she tried to record the sound, her device froze, and the audio became corrupted with static and moans. Determined to understand what had happened, Helena sought out the local priest. He refused to discuss anything, but let slip that there were sins buried that time could not erase. Before leaving, he wrote, "The key is in the crypt," on a napkin. The following night, Helena went to the church. The stone floor was loose in one part, and there, she found an ancient staircase. As she descended, the air grew heavy. Down below, extinguished torches, claw marks on the walls, and a torn robe on the altar. In the center of the crypt, a circle with 7 empty chairs. On the floor, the symbol of the inverted cross and words scratched with dried blood: "She needs a voice to return." A bell tolled 3 times, even though there had been no tower in the village for decades. Upon returning to the inn, Helena found the corridor walls scratched with charcoal. In crooked letters, "You called her." Her name was among them, repeated dozens of times. She felt a chill run down her spine. She was no longer alone. Residents began to disappear. First, the butcher, then 2 children. In every case, the same mark, an upside-down cross drawn on the door of the house. The village plunged into panic, but no one dared to mention Isidora. Helena confronted the priest again. He revealed that the founders of the village had sealed Isidora in a ritual of silence. As long as no one spoke her name, she would remain asleep. But the seal depended on absolute forgetfulness. While researching old newspapers, Helena discovered that the convent fire had been intentional. The nuns, led by Isidora, sought to open a portal to eternity. The fire was the last resort to prevent the complete awakening of the entity. But now it was too late. Helena, by researching, by speaking, by reading aloud the records, had broken the veil. At the top of the hill, the chapel reconstructed itself in shadows. Chants echoed, and 7 figures slowly walked toward the village. On the last recorded night of Veracruz, the wind stopped. The bells rang 13 times. The houses were empty, the roads covered in bare footprints. And at the entrance of the village, carved in stone, only one phrase: "She has returned." The small town of Jericho seemed ordinary, but it hid a secret that spanned generations. Every night, at 3:13 a.m., the bell of the old chapel rang by itself. even after being sealed for decades. No one dared to approach the place at that hour. In 1974, a group of teenagers mysteriously disappeared after a summoning game in the courtyard of the abandoned school. Their names were never forgotten. Since then, a thick fog covered the town on full moon nights. Clara, an investigative journalist, arrived in town with the aim of unraveling the case. Driven by bizarre stories and local legends, she decided to start her investigation at the municipal library, where she found an old diary. The diary belonged to Father Elias, the last parish priest of Jericho, who disappeared in the same year as the teenagers. His notes spoke of a pact sealed with blood and clamor, made in the basement of the chapel to protect Jericho from eternal fury. Intrigued, Clara followed the diary's instructions to a secret passage behind the altar. Descending mold-covered steps, she reached an underground chamber, where archaic symbols and extinguished candles still marked a dark ritual. In the center of the room, a stone with inscriptions in Latin read, "Whoever breaks the seal will free those who sleep, and those who sleep will come to collect the debt." Clara took photos, but upon returning, she realized that all were distorted and covered in fog. That night, Clara heard footsteps in the inn's hallway. When she opened the door, there was no one there. But on the floor, a note written in crooked letters said, "You know too much. Leave Jericho before the next toll of the bell." Ignoring the warning, she returned to the chapel to investigate further. On the altar, she found a portrait of the 5 missing teenagers, aged with completely black eyes. Behind the photos, there was a map marked with a strange symbol. The symbol led to the forest surrounding the town. There, Clara found a circular clearing with burned trees and, in the center, a stone sculpture with distorted faces, all silently screaming. The air was heavy and hard to breathe. An old man appeared among the trees. His name was Joachim, the last survivor of the pact. He revealed that in 1974, the town's leaders sealed an agreement with an entity to prevent a curse. But there was a price: sacrifices every generation. The teenagers, according to him, were the first offering. The bell tolled to remind that the time for payment was approaching. And now, with Clara there, the entity would come to collect the promised blood. "You were in the wrong place at the wrong time," Joachim said. When she tried to leave the forest, Clara got lost. Time seemed distorted. She saw shadows running between the trees and voices calling her with her own voice. Fear began to overwhelm her. Her watch stopped exactly at 3:13 a.m. Upon returning to the town, everything seemed different. The streets were deserted, the windows closed, and the sky had a reddish hue. She realized that Jericho had changed, or perhaps she had crossed into something beyond reality. In the fogged-up mirror of her room, words appeared written with invisible fingers. "You are next." The bell tolled with a violence that made the walls tremble. Screams echoed throughout the town, but no one left their homes. Clara tried to escape, but upon reaching the town's exit, there was a solid fog, as if an invisible wall prevented her from leaving. On the car radio, a voice whispered, "Now you're a part of the pact." The engine died. Everything went dark. Since then, no one has heard from Clara. But every full moon, the chapel bell tolls twice. The fog creeps towards the houses, and on the town's walls, a new photograph appears, that of Clara with black eyes, waiting for the next.